is how I made a center punch out of brass and EN8 steel. I also hardened it so that it would work on every single material you can imagine, and not only that, I made it in the shape of an assault rifle bullet. So I started off by getting my lathe set up. This is a small metalworking lathe, and I've got a variety of different drill bits. I started with 2mm and I go all the way up to 12.8mm. I'm just setting up the chuck right now, and I know I could have just gotten a brass tube. However, I hadn't thought of it at the time, and I ended up waiting a bit too long past the return date, so I couldn't end up going to return it. So I just had to make do and make the tube very different way. The small lathe that I was using didn't work very well at all. The tailstock kept on moving around and it wasn't very secure, so I knew I was just going to end up ruining the brass tube. So I just switched lathes and got a more secure drill bit and tailstock and started drilling all the way through, progressing with the different diameters of the drill bits. The tailstock was a lot more secure, so it was able to go through without any problem. However, I noticed that the drill bit was too short, so it wasn't able to go all the way through the rod, which wasn't really a problem because now I just had to repeat the whole process from the other side, and then it would make it a full tube. There weren't any problems because it just went all the way through and it was perfectly aligned. So that's how I got my 12.8 diameter tube. This is the steel rod that I have that will serve as the tip of the bullet, and as you can see it is slightly too big, so I don't have any more steps up from the drill bit, so I just have to surface this steel down instead of enlarging the tube. This wasn't really a problem. I just had to take off about 1mm or 2mm off the entire diameter of the brass rod, making sure that I'm oiling up the lathe bits and making sure that it doesn't go too fast. I can make it the required diameter. So I'm just taking off a little bit at a time, making sure that I don't go too far. And it's a perfect fit here, but I don't need it to go any smaller. You'll see why in a little bit. I need to heat it all the way up until it expands. Then once it's expanded, I can put this inside of this with some flux. I've got my flux somewhere over here, and it will hold it in place very, very firmly, which will then allow me to machine it, and it will be completely filled. Here is the flux I'm going to be using, and that's how I'm going to be holding it into place until this has heated up and expanded. Of course, all metals when heated expand, so I got this as a tight fit, and then I'll be able to put it in there and it'll be hugging it very, very tightly, and I'll be able to keep it in place, put the flux in, and then it'll be secured pretty much forever. Alright, so I got a Bunsen burner right there. That's just going to be used to light up the blowtorch, and I will be heating up the brass rod and the brass tube, and once they get hot enough I'll be able to put some solder right in between, and using capillary attraction it will end up sucking the solder all the way down the rod, holding it in place forever. I just have to heat it up very, very much so that it'll be able to melt the solder on its own. As you can see, I'm using quite a few different methods, using a blowtorch, flamethrower essentially, but none of it was working. Here's some epoxy, not the method I would have liked, but I guess it'll get the job done. Here's the metal, here's the board, that's the stick that I'm going to be mixing it with, and then I'll just leave it to dry. I ended up having to just go through a less cool but more practical version of just using some two-part epoxy to bond the brass and the steel. This wasn't the smartest of decisions, as you'll see later on, because I needed to heat up the tip of the steel, which I hadn't thought about at this time, and it ended up degrading the epoxy. But you'll see what happens later on, and it is not as bad as I make it seem right now. I'm able to fix the problem. Now I've just got the epoxy sitting right in between the steel and the brass. I can just wait for this to dry, come back the next day, and then I'll be able to start machining it. I put it on a piece of plastic so that it doesn't stick. So now they're bonded together, I'm going to use a conventional center punch as a marker, and this will just be a guideline for the length, and I can trace my bullet around the length of that. I'm going for the one in the middle over here. I think that looks the best, and I can just start tracing out my pattern onto there and start turning it. Now I'm just going to go ahead and turn on the lathe. I've made all of the markings that are necessary for me to machine the brass and the steel, and I need to make sure I don't go too far, otherwise it will start exposing the steel. So I have to make it look nice enough without actually going too far, which wasn't too much of a problem. It didn't look like I had much brass to work with, but it ended up feeling like a lot of brass, so I was able to go even deeper than I thought, while still making it look nice. I also used a little bit of oil so that the tools didn't overheat, and I had to just surface both ends of the rod so that the epoxy wasn't in the way. This is just a long process of surfacing the bar up to my required diameter, and then I can start making the indentations and the rounded tip for the bullets and get ready to start shaping the steel, etc, etc. And now I can just surface the tip of it where the bullet head will actually be, and the area where I'll be hardening. I'm just filing it down right now because that part is completely unnecessary and it's really thin and it's just going to get in my way. So I'm just filing down that little bit of brass that's right there. So I'm putting a 45-degree chamfer on both of the sides over there, which vary in height, and I've got an 8-degree taper for the tip of the bullet to make it a perfect point, and then I'm going to be filing it to make it a lot less pointed. I want it to be rounded over for now anyways. I'm just taking it out of the lathe, and then I can start getting ready to harden the tip of the bullet. Before I do that, however, I'm just going to start sanding down the surface of the bullet and making it a lot shinier. This was, again, an unnecessary step because it will just end up being oxidized after it's heated up. I ended up just going to Lidl to buy some vegetable oil, and I will be able to quench the bullet in there. I actually did quite a bit of research on what kind of oils to use for quenching, but it didn't really seem to have much of a solid answer. There were quite a few different oils. There were some specific quenching oils, but there weren't really any downsides to using a conventional vegetable oil. The first quench that I did didn't work out very well because the bullet was way too cold, so it didn't even end up hardening. So I just had to put some bricks behind it, which ended up heating it up a lot more, and the epoxy started to burn as the tip was getting red hot. So I just kept it there until it was glowing really, really hot, and dipped it in the oil. Here it is in the oil bath until it cools down. So the bullet has cooled down. Now I can start surfacing it and sanding it to give it a cleaner look. This is why I was saying before quenching it, it was completely unnecessary. Because I'm going to be doing it afterwards anyway to clean it up. And it ended up really nice. I decided I didn't want to go for a shiny look because then I'll get rid of the appearance that I was looking for, a matte finish. So I just went up to about 400 grit sandpaper, got rid of any impurities, any scratches, while leaving a nice matte finish. This actually wasn't too long of a process since I didn't have to go through many grits, and it ended up looking really, really nice. It had the desired effect. It was fully hardened, and it worked in any material since it's just a hardened tip. I ended up having to re-epoxy the bullet because the heat degraded the epoxy, but it ended up completely fine. Alright, so I have finished my project. It turned out really nicely, and I love the matte finish on it. So please leave a like on this video, subscribe if you're new. Also comment down below if you got any more project ideas for me to make. Also check out my playlist for all metalworking videos, and I've got shorts in there as well. So go check that out. I'll see you in the next video.